The moment I saw the bright orange envelope tucked into my door frame, I knew my peaceful Saturday morning was about to go up in smoke, and not the good kind from my fireplace. I pulled it free and tore it open right there on my front porch in Asheville, North Carolina, letting the mountain air wash over me as I read the ridiculous notice. Violation notice. Excessive smoke emission from residential wood burning. Fine, $500. Second offense will result in $1,000 fine and possible legal action. The letter was signed by Patricia Mooreland, the president of the Ridgeview Heights HOA, and it made my blood boil hotter than the coals in my wood stove. I had moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago specifically because I wanted a place where I could enjoy the mountain lifestyle. The covenants mentioned nothing about firewood restrictions when I bought the house. I checked them 3 times before signing the papers. Now apparently Patricia had decided that my occasional wood fire was somehow a nuisance to the entire neighborhood. My name is Oscar Garrett, and I work as a software engineer from home, which means I spend a lot of time in my house appreciating the small comforts that make life worth living. A crackling fire on a cold evening is one of those comforts. I am not the kind of guy who looks for trouble, but I am also not the kind of guy who rolls over when someone tries to push me around with made-up rules. I walked back inside and grabbed my phone, dialing the HOA office number listed on the violation notice. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. Ridgeview Heights HOA, this is Patricia speaking. Her voice had that particular quality that immediately put my teeth on edge, like she had been practicing her condescending tone in the mirror. Hi Patricia, this is Oscar Garrett from 847 Mountain View Drive. I just received a violation notice about my fireplace smoke. Yes, Mr. Garrett. We have received multiple complaints about the excessive smoke coming from your chimney. It is creating a nuisance for your neighbors and violating our community standards. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice level. I have read through the HOA covenants and bylaws thoroughly. There is no mention of restrictions on wood-burning fireplaces or smoke. Mr. Garrett, we have broad authority to enforce community standards under Section 7.3, which addresses nuisances and disturbances. Your smoke constitutes such a nuisance. Who complained exactly? That information is confidential. However, I can tell you that we have received complaints from multiple residents in your vicinity. So you are not going to tell me who complained or show me any evidence that I am actually violating something specific. Her voice took on an even sharper edge. Mr. Garrett, I do not appreciate your tone. The fine stands. If you continue to create excessive smoke, further penalties will be assessed. Good day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, feeling that particular brand of frustration that comes from dealing with petty authority figures who have let a tiny amount of power go to their heads. I spent the next hour researching everything I could find about HOA regulations, wood burning restrictions, and smoke ordinances in Asheville. What I discovered was interesting. While the city did have some air quality regulations, they were primarily focused on commercial operations and did not restrict residential wood burning except during rare air quality alerts. The HOA covenants truly did not mention wood burning restrictions at all. Patricia was relying on a vague nuisance clause to justify her fine, which meant she was basically making up rules as she went along. Over the next few days, I paid more attention to my neighbors and quickly figured out who had probably complained. 2 houses down lived a woman named Brenda Jenkins, who I had seen talking with Patricia at the neighborhood pool the previous month. Brenda had one of those perpetually pinched faces that suggested she had never enjoyed a single day in her entire life. She spent most of her time peering out her front window at the street, probably taking notes on everyone's minor infractions. I decided to pay the fine under protest and send a formal letter to the HOA board requesting a hearing on the matter. I was not going to let this go, but I also did not want to rack up additional penalties while I fought it. The money hurt. $500 was not pocket change, but the principle hurt more. 2 weeks later, I received a response to my hearing request. It was scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse. I marked my calendar and started preparing my case. I printed out copies of the HOA covenants, highlighted the relevant sections, and made notes about the lack of any specific smoke or wood burning restrictions. I also researched proper wood burning techniques. That is when I had my revelation. The issue was not that I was burning wood. The issue was that I had been burning wood that was not properly seasoned. I had been buying firewood from a local guy who delivered it cheap, and it turned out that wood was probably only dried for a few months instead of the full year or more needed for proper seasoning. Wet or green wood creates significantly more smoke than properly seasoned wood. If I switched to burning only perfectly seasoned wood, the smoke would be minimal. I started researching firewood suppliers and found a premium operation about 30 miles outside Asheville that specialized in kiln-dried, perfectly seasoned hardwood. It cost 3 times as much as what I had been paying, but it would burn clean and hot with minimal smoke. I ordered 2 cords to be delivered the following week. The Thursday hearing arrived. I walked into the community clubhouse carrying a folder with all my documentation. The room was set up with a long table at the front where 5 board members sat, with Patricia in the center position. About a dozen residents sat in the audience chairs, including Brenda Jenkins right in the front row. Patricia called the meeting to order and quickly moved through some routine business before getting to my case. Next, we have a hearing regarding a nuisance violation by Oscar Garrett of 847 Mountain View Drive. Mr. Garrett has requested to address the board regarding his fine for excessive smoke emissions. I stood up and walked to the small podium facing the board. Thank you for hearing me tonight. I am here to contest the $500 fine I received for smoke from my wood-burning fireplace. I have several points to make. First, the HOA covenants contain no specific restrictions on wood-burning fireplaces or smoke. I have highlighted the relevant sections here. I passed copies of my documentation to the board members. Second, the city of Asheville does not prohibit residential wood burning. Third, the fine was issued based on unspecified complaints from unidentified neighbors, which does not give me any opportunity to understand or address the specific concerns. Finally, I have taken steps to ensure that any future smoke from my fireplace will be minimal by switching to properly seasoned firewood. Patricia barely glanced at the papers I had provided. Mr. Garrett, as I explained on the phone, we have broad authority under Section 7.3 to address nuisances. Your smoke was creating a problem for your neighbors. The fine stands. But what specifically constitutes excessive smoke? Is there a measurement, a standard? How am I supposed to comply with a rule that has no definition? One of the other board members, an older man named Robert, spoke up. That is actually a fair point, Patricia. We should probably have some kind of standard. Patricia shot him a look that could have frozen water. Robert, we know it when we see it. Mr. Garrett's smoke was excessive. Multiple neighbors complained. Can you at least tell me who complained? I asked. That is confidential, Patricia said firmly. Brenda Jenkins stood up from her seat. I complained. That smoke was pouring into my yard and making it impossible for me to enjoy my patio. Finally, some honesty. I turned to face her. Mrs. Jenkins, I appreciate you being direct. I apologize for any inconvenience. As I mentioned, I have purchased premium seasoned wood that will produce minimal smoke. I hope that resolves your concerns. You should not be burning wood at all, Brenda said, her voice rising. This is a modern neighborhood. People should use gas or electric heat like civilized people. My house has a wood-burning fireplace installed by the original builder. I am using it as intended. Patricia banged her gavel. Apparently she had a gavel now. This is not a debate, Mr. Garrett. The fine stands. If we receive further complaints about smoke from your property, you will face escalating penalties. Next item on the agenda. I stood there for a moment, frustrated but not surprised. I had expected this outcome. The hearing was just for show. Patricia had already made up her mind, and the board was either too intimidated or too apathetic to challenge her. I walked out of the clubhouse and drove home, my mind already working on my next move. If they wanted to play hardball with made-up rules, I would comply so perfectly that they would have nothing to complain about. The delivery of my premium firewood arrived the next Tuesday. The driver stacked it neatly in my side yard, and I inspected it carefully. The wood was beautiful, split oak and hickory that had been kiln-dried to the perfect moisture content. The ends were checked and cracked, showing that it had dried properly. When I knocked two pieces together, they made a hollow sound rather than a dull thud. This was exactly what I needed. That evening, I built my first fire with the new wood. I arranged the logs carefully in my fireplace, using proper technique to ensure maximum efficiency and minimal smoke. I cracked a window to provide adequate airflow, preventing the smoke from backing up. When I lit the kindling, the fire caught quickly and burned hot and clean. I went outside and looked at my chimney. There was barely a wisp of smoke visible, nothing like the thick clouds that my old wet wood had produced. Perfect. Over the next few weeks, I burned fires regularly, always using the same careful technique. The wood burned beautifully, providing excellent heat and ambience with almost no visible smoke. I was confident that even Brenda Jenkins would have trouble complaining about it. But I underestimated her dedication to being miserable. 3 weeks after the hearing, another orange envelope appeared in my door. This time the fine was $1,000. The violation notice claimed continued excessive smoke emissions despite previous warning and fine. I immediately took out my phone and started documenting everything. I took pictures of my chimney showing the minimal smoke. I recorded videos of my fires burning cleanly. I even bought a moisture meter to test my firewood and photographed the readings, which showed consistent moisture content below 15%, well within the range for properly seasoned wood. Then I called Patricia again. This time I was not asking questions. I was making statements. Patricia, I received another violation notice. This is completely unjustified. I have been burning only properly seasoned wood with minimal smoke output. I have photographic and video evidence of this. I am not paying this fine. Mr. Garrett, we have received continued complaints. The fine is valid. If you do not pay within 30 days, we will place a lien on your property. You are going to place a lien on my property for using my fireplace as intended. That is outrageous. I am in full compliance with all actual regulations. You are in violation of our community standards. Pay the fine or face further action. She hung up again. I stood there shaking with anger. This had gone beyond petty HOA nonsense. Patricia was now threatening my property over a completely manufactured violation. It was time to escalate. I spent that evening drafting a detailed letter to every member of the HOA board, copying in every piece of evidence I had collected. I explained the situation clearly and objectively, pointed out that Patricia was enforcing non-existent rules, and requested that the board overturn the fine and rein in her overreach. I sent the letters via certified mail so I would have proof of delivery. I also started talking to my other neighbors. I knocked on doors up and down my street, introducing myself properly and asking if anyone had issues with smoke from my chimney. Out of 15 houses I visited, 13 people said they had never noticed any smoke problem. One person said they had noticed some smoke a few weeks ago, but it seemed fine now. Only one person, an elderly man who apparently was friends with Brenda and Patricia, said he thought the smoke was a problem. Armed with this information, I felt confident that I could prove Patricia and Brenda were manufacturing complaints to harass me. But I still needed to figure out what their end game was. Why were they so focused on my fireplace? The answer came from an unexpected source. My next-door neighbor, a friendly guy named Tom who worked as a real estate agent, stopped by one Saturday afternoon while I was splitting some of the firewood to make it burn even more efficiently. "Hey, Oscar, got a minute?" Tom asked, looking a bit uncomfortable. "Sure, what is up?" "I probably should not tell you this, but I think you should know. Brenda Jenkins has been trying to get Patricia to force you to sell your house." I stopped mid-swing with the splitting maul. "What? Why?" "Brenda's daughter is looking to move back to Asheville. She wants to buy a house in this neighborhood, specifically one with a view of the mountains. Your house has one of the best views on the street. Brenda has been pushing Patricia to make things difficult for you in the hope that you will decide to sell." Everything suddenly made sense. This was not about smoke or community standards. This was a coordinated harassment campaign designed to drive me out of my home so Brenda's daughter could buy it. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. Tom nodded. "I heard them talking about it at a neighborhood gathering last month. Patricia apparently thinks that if she finds you enough, you will decide it is not worth the hassle and put your house on the market. It is completely unethical, maybe even illegal. I thought you deserved to know what you are really dealing with." "Tom, I really appreciate you telling me this." "That takes guts," he shrugged. "I have lived here for 10 years. Patricia has gotten worse and worse about abusing her power. Somebody needs to stand up to her eventually. Might as well be you." After Tom left, I sat on my porch thinking through my options. If Patricia and Brenda were engaged in a deliberate harassment campaign to force me to sell my property, that went beyond simple HOA overreach. That was potentially fraud, conspiracy, and a whole host of other legal issues. I needed to talk to a lawyer. Monday morning, I called a real estate attorney whose name I found through a local legal directory. Her name was Susan Chen, and she had excellent reviews for handling HOA disputes. I explained the situation to her over the phone, and she agreed to meet with me that afternoon. Susan's office was in downtown Asheville, in one of the renovated historic buildings near Pack Square. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, and had the kind of direct manner that told me she did not waste time on nonsense. "So Patricia Mooreland is fining you for violating rules that do not exist in order to force you to sell your house to a specific buyer," Susan said, reviewing the notes she had taken during our conversation. "You have any evidence of this plan?" "I have a witness who overheard them discussing it. My neighbor Tom. He is willing to testify if needed." "That is good. What other evidence do you have?" I pulled out my folder and showed her everything. The original covenant documents with no mention of wood burning restrictions. The photos and videos of my minimal smoke. The documentation from my neighbors saying they had no complaints. The timeline of fines escalating despite my compliance. Susan reviewed it all carefully. "This is actually a pretty strong case." The HOA is clearly violating their own procedures and enforcing non-existent rules. The fact that there may be an ulterior motive makes it even worse. Here is what I recommend. First, do not pay the second fine. Second, I am going to send a formal legal letter to the HOA board informing them that their actions constitute harassment and potentially fraud. Third, if they do not back down, we file a lawsuit against both the HOA and Patricia Mooreland personally. How much is this going to cost me? My retainer is $3,000. If this goes to court, it could be more. However, if we win, we can pursue damages and attorney's fees from the HOA, which means you would likely recover your costs plus additional compensation for the harassment. I thought about it for about 10 seconds. Let us do it. I am not letting them force me out of my home. Susan drafted a letter that same day and sent it to the HOA board via certified mail and email. The letter laid out the case clearly, pointed out all the violations of proper procedure, referenced the evidence of harassment, and demanded that all fines be rescinded immediately. It also warned that failure to comply would result in legal action. 3 days later, I got a response, but not the one I expected. Instead of backing down, Patricia doubled down. She sent me a third violation notice, this time claiming that my firewood storage was a nuisance and violated aesthetic standards. The fine was another $1,000. Additionally, she scheduled a special board meeting to discuss revoking common area privileges for me, which would mean I could not use the neighborhood pool, clubhouse, or walking trails. Susan was actually pleased when I showed her the new notice. This is perfect. She is making our case for us. This shows a clear pattern of harassment and escalating retaliation. File this away with the other evidence. The special board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Susan advised me not to attend. Let them have their little meeting. Everything they do just adds to our case. We will let them dig their hole deeper. But I had another idea. I contacted Tom and several of my other neighbors who had been supportive. I told them about the meeting and suggested that they might want to attend and voice their opinions about Patricia's behavior. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Apparently, I was not the first person Patricia had targeted with questionable fines and rules. Several other homeowners had their own stories of HOA overreach. Thursday evening arrived, and from what I heard later, the meeting did not go the way Patricia expected. Instead of the usual handful of board residents, nearly 40 people showed up, and they were not there to support Patricia. Tom called me right after the meeting ended. He was practically laughing. "Oscar, you should have seen it. Patricia called the meeting to order and started talking about revoking your privileges." Then Jim Reynolds stood up and asked why the board was spending so much time harassing you when there were actual issues in the neighborhood that needed attention, like the broken street lights on Oak Avenue. Then Maria Chen, no relation to your lawyer, started talking about how Patricia had fined her $200 last year for having her trash can visible from the street 30 minutes before the collection time restriction ended. Seriously, it got better. At least 10 other people stood up and shared their own stories about ridiculous fines and made up rules. Patricia tried to keep control of the meeting, but people were shouting questions at her. Robert, the board member who seemed reasonable at your hearing, actually made a motion to rescind all your fines and issue a formal apology. It did not pass because Patricia and 2 other board members voted against it, but the vote was 3-2, which means Patricia is losing control of the board. That is great news. There is more. At the end of the meeting, about 15 people said they were going to run for board positions in the next election, which is in 3 months. Patricia looked like she was going to have a stroke. I think her reign of terror might finally be coming to an end. This was better than I had hoped. Not only was I fighting my own battle, but I had apparently sparked a neighborhood uprising against HOA tyranny. The next week, Susan filed our lawsuit in Buncombe County Superior Court. We sued the Ridgeview Heights HOA and Patricia Mooreland personally for harassment, breach of contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We requested that all fines be rescinded, that the HOA be ordered to follow its own procedures, and that we be awarded damages and attorney's fees. The lawsuit made a splash in the neighborhood. Several local news outlets picked up the story because HOA disputes always make good news copy. A reporter from the Asheville Citizen-Times called me for an interview, and I explained the situation carefully, sticking to the facts and emphasizing that I just wanted to use my fireplace in peace. The story ran with the headline, "Asheville Homeowner Sues HOA Over Fireplace Dispute." It included quotes from me, a no comment from Patricia, and interviews with several other neighborhood residents who shared their own HOA horror stories. The comments section exploded with hundreds of people sharing their own experiences with overbearing HOA rules. Patricia did not take the publicity well. 2 days after the article ran, she showed up at my house unannounced. I watched through my front window as she marched up my driveway, her face red with anger. I considered not answering the door, but I was curious what she would say. Plus, I had my phone ready to record the conversation. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. "Patricia, what can I do for you? You are destroying this neighborhood," she said, her voice shaking. "That newspaper article has made us look ridiculous. We have a responsibility to maintain standards here. Patricia, you fined me $1,500 for using my fireplace correctly. You are trying to force me to sell my house to Brenda's daughter. You have created a hostile environment based on rules that do not exist." I am not the problem here. Her eyes widened slightly at the mention of Brenda's daughter. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Sure you do not. Look, you can make this easy or hard. Drop the fines, follow your own procedures, and stop harassing me. Or we can continue with the lawsuit and let a judge sort it out. You cannot win. The HOA has legal authority to enforce community standards. We will see what the court says. Now please leave my property." She stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to say more, but apparently thinking better of it. She turned and walked back to her car, nearly tripping over a crack in my driveway in her hurry to leave. I sent the recording to Susan, who added it to our evidence file. The weeks that followed were tense. I continued burning fires with my perfectly seasoned wood, documenting everything carefully. The smoke output was minimal, just a slight heat shimmer on cold mornings. Even Brenda could not legitimately complain about it, though I am sure she tried. The HOA sent me several letters demanding payment of the fines, threatening liens and legal action. Susan responded to each one with increasingly stern letters pointing out that the matter was now in litigation and all communication should go through her office. Then things took an interesting turn. About 6 weeks after we filed the lawsuit, I received a call from Robert, the board member who had questioned Patricia at my original hearing. "Mr. Garrett, this is Robert Thompson from the HOA board. I hope I am not bothering you." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to call you personally to let you know that I and several other concerned residents have been conducting our own investigation into Patricia's management of the HOA. What we have found is concerning. It appears that she may have been issuing fines and collecting payments without properly documenting them or depositing the money into the HOA accounts." I sat up straighter. "Are you saying she has been embezzling?" "I am saying there are significant irregularities in the financial records." We have contacted a forensic accountant to conduct a full audit. I thought you should know because it may affect your lawsuit. It also means that some of the fines she issued, including possibly yours, may have been schemes to generate money that she then kept for herself. Robert, that is huge. Have you contacted the police? Not yet. We want to complete the audit first so we have solid evidence, but I wanted you to be aware. Your lawsuit may have uncovered something much bigger than HOA overreach. After I hung up with Robert, I immediately called Susan and relayed the conversation. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. If Patricia has been embezzling HOA funds, that changes everything, Susan said. That is criminal fraud. It also means that the HOA itself may be a victim here, not just a defendant. We may need to adjust our legal strategy. What do you recommend? Let us wait for the audit results. If they show evidence of embezzlement, we can use that to strengthen our case and potentially get the HOA to settle quickly. They will want to distance themselves from Patricia and avoid further liability. The audit took 3 weeks. During that time, the neighborhood was buzzing with rumors and speculation. People whispered at the mailboxes and talked in hushed tones at the pool. Patricia stopped showing up to neighborhood events, which only fueled the speculation. When the audit results came back, they were damning. The forensic accountant found that over the past 3 years, Patricia had collected approximately $45,000 in fines and fees that were never properly documented or deposited into HOA accounts. She had been using a separate bank account in her name to collect the payments, claiming it was for administrative purposes. But the money had then been transferred to her personal accounts. Robert called another special board meeting to discuss the findings. This time, the meeting was packed. Nearly every resident in the neighborhood showed up. I decided to attend this one, sitting in the back row and watching the drama unfold. Robert presented the audit findings in detail, his voice grave. The room erupted in angry shouts as people realized they had been scammed. Several residents stood up and demanded to know if their fines had been legitimate or just cash grabs. Others wanted to know why the board had not been overseeing Patricia more carefully. Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming the separate account was for efficiency and that all the money had been used for HOA purposes, but she could not produce any documentation to support her claims. Her explanations became increasingly desperate and contradictory. Finally, one of the other board members made a motion to remove Patricia from her position as president and ban her from any future HOA leadership roles. The motion passed unanimously, with Patricia abstaining. She gathered her things and left the meeting in tears, with the entire neighborhood watching in silence. After Patricia's departure, Robert stood up again. I also want to address the situation with Oscar Garrett. Mr. Garrett has been fighting fines that appear to have been completely unjustified and were likely issued as part of a harassment campaign. I move that we rescind all fines issued to Mr. Garrett, issue him a formal apology, and authorize payment of his legal fees as a settlement of his lawsuit. Another board member seconded the motion. It passed unanimously. Robert looked back at me in the audience. Mr. Garrett, on behalf of the board, I sincerely apologize for the harassment you have endured. Your fight against these unjust fines helped us uncover serious financial misconduct that was affecting the entire neighborhood. Thank you for standing your ground. The room erupted in applause. Several of my neighbors came over to shake my hand and thank me. It was surreal, but the story was not over yet. The board voted to turn over all evidence of Patricia's embezzlement to the Asheville Police Department. Susan helped coordinate the transfer of documents and provided information about my case as well. The police investigation took several months. During that time, life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Robert became the interim HOA president and immediately set about reforming the organization's procedures. He created clear, specific rules with objective standards. He instituted oversight procedures for financial management. He opened up board meetings to more resident participation. I continued to burn my perfectly seasoned wood in my fireplace, enjoying quiet evenings by the fire without any orange envelopes appearing in my door. The view of the mountains from my living room was spectacular, and I was glad I had fought to keep my home. Brenda Jenkins put her house on the market and moved to a different neighborhood. Without Patricia to enable her complaints, she apparently decided she could not stand living near someone who actually used their fireplace. I helped her load boxes into her moving truck because I am not a completely petty person. Mostly. The criminal case against Patricia moved forward slowly, as these things do. She was charged with felony embezzlement, multiple counts of fraud and theft. The district attorney's office took the case seriously because it involved a position of trust and multiple victims. 8 months after the initial lawsuit was filed, Patricia Mooreland pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges in Buncombe County Superior Court. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to make full restitution of the $45,000 she had stolen, plus additional damages to victims who could prove they had been wrongfully fined. I attended the sentencing hearing with several other neighborhood residents. Patricia looked small and defeated, nothing like the imperious HOA president who had threatened my property over fireplace smoke. She apologized to the court and to the victims, though it rang hollow after everything she had done. The judge was not sympathetic. "Miss Mooreland, you held a position of trust in your community. Instead of serving your neighbors, you exploited them for personal gain. You created a hostile environment where people were afraid to use their own property for fear of retribution. That kind of abuse of power cannot be tolerated." After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Carolina sunshine. Susan was waiting by her car, organizing her files. "Well, that is the end of that chapter," she said. "Thanks for everything, Susan. I could not have fought this without you. You did the hard part by standing your ground and gathering evidence. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and moved on. I am too stubborn for that." She laughed. "Stubborn is good sometimes. So what are you going to do now?" "I am going to go home, build a fire with my perfectly seasoned wood, and enjoy my house in peace." And that is exactly what I did. That evening, I stacked oak and hickory logs in my fireplace, using the techniques I had perfected over the past months. I lit the kindling and watched the flames catch and spread, the wood burning hot and clean with barely a wisp of smoke rising from my chimney. The new HOA board had officially added reasonable wood burning guidelines to the covenants, specifying that residents should use properly seasoned wood and follow basic safety practices, but otherwise placing no restrictions on fireplace use. It was exactly what should have been there all along. Tom stopped by that evening with a 6-pack of local craft beer to celebrate the end of the saga. We sat on my back deck, watching the sun set over the mountains while the fire warmed the house behind us. "You know, when you first moved in, I never would have guessed you would end up taking down the HOA president and exposing a financial fraud scheme," Tom said, taking a sip of his beer. "I just wanted to burn some firewood," I replied. "Well, you burned it perfectly, literally and figuratively." We clinked our bottles together and watched the sky turn orange and purple. The neighborhood was quieter now, more peaceful. People were not afraid of orange envelopes anymore. The new board was actually working on real issues like fixing the broken street lights and organizing community events. The lawsuit settlement covered all my legal fees and included a payment for damages that more than compensated me for the stress and hassle of fighting Patricia's harassment campaign. The HOA's insurance company was not happy, but that was between them and the organization's previous leadership. Several months later, the HOA held elections for the board positions. A diverse slate of candidates ran, all committed to transparent governance and reasonable rules. Tom actually won a position, and he immediately started working on updating the neighborhood's infrastructure and improving communication with residents. I was asked to run for a position too, but I declined. I had done my part by standing up to corruption. Now I just wanted to enjoy my home and my life without any more drama. One cold evening in December, almost exactly a year after I received that first orange violation notice, I sat by my fireplace, reading a book. The fire crackled pleasantly, the seasoned wood burning with a clean blue flame. I had gotten my routine down to a science. I knew exactly how to stack the logs for optimal airflow. I knew which pieces to use for starting the fire and which to add later for sustained heat. I even knew which wood to save for the coldest nights when I wanted maximum heat output. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mr. Garrett, this is Brenda Jenkins. I wanted to apologize for my role in the situation with Patricia. I let my desire to help my daughter cloud my judgment. What we did was wrong. I am sorry." I stared at the message for a long moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it or send back something sarcastic, but another part of me recognized that it took courage for Brenda to reach out, and that holding on to anger was not going to make my life any better. I typed back, "I appreciate the apology. I hope you are doing well in your new place." Simple, civil, and final. I deleted the conversation and went back to my book. The fire burned down to glowing coals, and I added another log, watching it catch and flame. Outside, snow had started to fall, dusting the mountain views with white. This was exactly why I had bought this house. This moment, this peace, this simple pleasure of a warm fire on a cold night. Patricia had tried to take it away from me with her made-up rules and petty tyranny. Instead, she ended up in prison, and I ended up exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, burning perfectly seasoned wood in complete compliance with reasonable rules. The whole experience had taught me some valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of documentation, and the danger of giving small-minded people unchecked authority. It had also taught me way more about firewood than I ever expected to know. I became something of a neighborhood expert on the subject. People would stop by to ask advice about which wood to buy and how to store it properly. I was happy to help. Knowledge is meant to be shared, and if I could help someone else avoid smoke problems or HOA troubles, it was worth a few minutes of my time. The neighborhood itself had transformed. With Patricia gone and new leadership in place, people actually started to enjoy living in Ridgeview Heights again. The pool opened for longer hours. The clubhouse hosted regular community events. The walking trails got maintained properly. It turned out that an HOA could actually enhance a community when it was run by people who cared about their neighbors instead of power tripping on minor infractions. Sometimes I would see people out in the neighborhood burning their own fires, smoke rising from chimneys up and down the street. It always made me smile. We were all just trying to enjoy our homes and our lives. That should not have been controversial, but Patricia had tried to make it so. On New Year's Eve, the neighborhood held a celebration in the clubhouse. Someone had the brilliant idea to have a bonfire outside, and several of us contributed wood from our personal stacks. I brought some of my premium seasoned hardwood, and it burned beautifully, providing warmth and light for the gathered crowd. As midnight approached, Tom raised his glass for a toast. To new beginnings, better leadership, and the right to burn firewood without harassment. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. The bonfire crackled and popped, sending sparks up into the cold night sky. Fireworks exploded over the mountains as midnight struck, and the whole neighborhood cheered. I looked around at my neighbors, people I had gotten to know through the whole ordeal. Many of them had supported me during the fight against Patricia. Others had shared their own stories of HOA overreach. Together, we had changed our community for the better. The fire burned bright and clean, perfectly seasoned wood producing maximum heat with minimal smoke, exactly the way it should be. I had learned to appreciate the science and art of proper wood burning, understanding moisture content, air flow, and combustion efficiency. More importantly, I had learned that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it seems easier to just give in. The $500 fine had seemed like a lot of money at the time, but paying it without protest would have only encouraged more harassment. Standing my ground had cost time, stress, and legal fees, but it had ultimately saved my home and helped dozens of other people in the process. In the months that followed, I settled into a comfortable routine. Work during the day, fire in the evening, peace and quiet without orange envelopes. The view of the mountains never got old. Every sunset was spectacular, every morning was crisp and beautiful. I even started dating someone I met at one of the new community events the HOA organized. Her name was Caroline, and she lived a few streets over. She thought the whole Firewood saga was hilarious and admired that I had stood up to Patricia. We spent many evenings by my fireplace, talking and laughing, the fire burning steadily with its clean, minimal smoke. "You know, I think Patricia did you a favor in a weird way," Caroline said one evening as we watched the flames dance. "How do you figure?" "Well, if she had not harassed you, you never would have learned all this stuff about seasoned wood and proper burning techniques. You might still be using that wet wood that smoked up the whole neighborhood. Plus, you helped change the HOA for the better. That is pretty impressive." I guess that is one way to look at it, though I would have preferred to learn about firewood without the legal battle and fraud investigation. She laughed. "Fair enough, but you have to admit it makes for a good story." She was right about that. It did make for a good story, one I had told several times to friends and family who could not believe the lengths Patricia had gone to over something as simple as fireplace smoke. The criminal restitution process eventually resulted in me receiving a check for the $1,500 in fines I had been charged, plus additional compensation for damages. I used some of it to buy more premium firewood, enough to last me through several winters. The rest I donated to a local charity that helped people pay their heating bills, figuring that if my fight had resulted in extra money, I should use it to help people stay warm. Spring came to Asheville, and the need for fires diminished. I spent more time on my deck, enjoying the mountain views and the mild weather. The neighborhood continued to improve under its new leadership. Property values actually went up once word spread that Ridgeview Heights had cleaned house and was now a pleasant place to live. Patricia served her time in a minimum security facility, and I honestly did not think about her much. She had been a problem, the problem had been solved, and now life moved on. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was required to attend counseling as part of her sentence, working through whatever issues had led her to abuse her authority so egregiously. I hoped she learned something from the experience, But that was not my concern anymore. My concern was living my life and enjoying my home. Summer brought long days and warm evenings. No need for fires, but I spent time maintaining my firewood supply, stacking the new delivery so it would continue to season and be ready for the next winter. There was something meditative about the work, the rhythm of splitting and stacking, the satisfaction of seeing neat rows of wood ready to burn. Tom became a fixture at my house, often stopping by with beer or dinner from a local restaurant. We had become good friends through the whole ordeal, bonded by fighting against HOA tyranny together. You know what I realized? Tom said one evening as we grilled burgers on my deck. Patricia actually united the neighborhood in a way. Everyone has a shared story now about the corrupt HOA president who got caught. It gives us something to bond over. That is a weird silver lining. Hey, I take my silver linings where I can find them. Plus, serving on the board has been interesting. We are actually making positive changes instead of just hassling people over petty violations. That is what an HOA should do. Exactly. We're planning to update the playground equipment and repave some of the walking trails. Real improvements that people actually want. It is amazing what you can accomplish when you are not spending all your time and money on harassment campaigns and embezzlement. Fall returned, bringing cooler temperatures and the first need for fires. I went through my stacks of seasoned wood, selecting the best pieces for the season's first burn. Everything was perfectly dry, perfectly split, ready to produce clean heat and minimal smoke. The first fire of the season felt like a celebration. I invited Caroline and Tom over, and we sat around the fireplace talking and laughing. The fire burned beautifully, the flames reflecting off the glass in the fireplace doors, the heat spreading through the room. To perfectly seasoned firewood, Tom said, raising his glass. And to standing your ground, Caroline added. And to good neighbors who have your back, I finished. We clinked glasses and settled in for the evening. Outside, the mountains were beginning their transformation into fall colors, reds and golds spreading across the slopes. Inside, the fire crackled and warmed, smoke rising from my chimney in barely visible wisps, exactly as it should be. This was what home was supposed to feel like. Safe, comfortable, free from harassment and made-up rules. It had taken a fight to get here, but it was worth it. As the seasons continued to cycle, the neighborhood evolved. New people moved in, drawn by the improved management and community feel. The old-timers who had lived through the Patricia era would tell the stories to the newcomers, warning them about the importance of good HOA governance and the danger of letting one person accumulate too much unchecked power. I became known as the guy who took down the corrupt HOA president, which was both flattering and slightly embarrassing. I had not set out to be a neighborhood hero. I had just wanted to burn my firewood in peace. But I accepted the reputation gracefully and tried to use it for good, encouraging people to speak up when they saw problems and to demand accountability from their leaders. Years passed. The memory of Patricia Mooreland faded from daily conversation, becoming just a cautionary tale told at neighborhood gatherings. The HOA continued to function smoothly under rotating leadership, with term limits now in place to prevent anyone from accumulating too much authority. My firewood technique remained perfect. Every winter, I burned seasoned wood with minimal smoke, providing warmth and ambience exactly as the original builder had intended when they installed the fireplace. I never received another violation notice. Caroline and I got more serious, and eventually she moved into my house, bringing her own furniture and belongings. She loved the fireplace as much as I did, and we spent many winter evenings curled up together watching the flames. "You know, I should thank Patricia," Caroline said one night as we sat by the fire. "Why is that? If she had not made your life miserable, you might not have come to that community event where we met. Her harassment campaign indirectly brought us together." I laughed. "That is definitely the most generous interpretation of events possible, but I will take it." The fire burned low, and I added another log, watching it catch and flame. The wood was perfect, as always. 3 years of practice had made me an expert. I could judge moisture content by the weight of the wood. I could predict how long a piece would burn by its size and density. I knew exactly how much air to allow for optimal combustion. All of that knowledge had come from fighting a petty tyrant who wanted to force me out of my home. Life is funny that way sometimes. The challenges we face end up teaching us skills we never expected to need, and those skills enrich our lives in ways we could not have predicted. The mountains outside my window stood eternal, the same views that had attracted me to this house in the first place. Those views were worth fighting for. This home was worth fighting for. The principle of being left alone to enjoy your property in peace was worth fighting for. Patricia had learned that the hard way, sitting in a prison cell because she could not resist abusing her authority and stealing from her neighbors. I had learned it too, though my lesson was more positive. Sometimes standing your ground and fighting back against bullies is the only way to protect what matters. The fire burned through the evening, providing warmth and light, the smoke rising invisibly into the mountain air. Perfectly seasoned wood, burning perfectly clean, exactly as it should be. No orange envelopes, no harassment, no drama. Just a man, his home, his fireplace, and the peace he had fought to protect. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the lawsuit or the criminal case or the neighborhood politics. Just the simple ability to live in my home, use my fireplace, and enjoy the life I had built for myself in the mountains of North Carolina. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall. Each winter brought new fires, new evenings by the hearth, new memories created in the warmth and light. The firewood stacks grew and diminished, were replenished and burned again, an endless cycle of gathering and consumption that connected me to traditions stretching back thousands of years. Humans have been burning wood for warmth since the discovery of fire. Patricia Mooreland had tried to stop me from participating in that ancient tradition, all because of some petty scheme to help her friend's daughter buy my house. She had failed spectacularly, and I continued to burn my fires, season after season, year after year. The neighborhood prospered. Property values rose. People enjoyed living there. The HOA functioned as it should, providing services and maintaining standards without harassment or overreach. It was a good place to live, and I was glad I had fought to stay. On the 5th anniversary of receiving that first orange violation notice, I built a special fire. I used the best wood from my stack, arranged it perfectly, and invited everyone who had supported me during the fight. Tom came, along with Robert and several other board members past and present. Caroline was there, of course. Other neighbors who had stood up at that crucial meeting stopped by. We gathered around the fire, sharing food and drinks and stories. People toasted to justice, to good neighbors, to standing up for what is right. The fire burned bright and clean, its warmth spreading through the room and out to the deck where people mingled. "You know what the best part is," Robert said, standing near the fireplace with a glass of wine. "This whole situation taught us how to be a better community. We learned that rules should serve people, not the other way around. We learned to question authority and demand accountability. Those are valuable lessons." "Here, here," someone called out, and others echoed the sentiment. I looked around at the gathered crowd, feeling grateful for these people and this place. The fight had been difficult, but it had brought out the best in many people. It had shown who could be counted on, who would stand up for their neighbors, who valued justice over convenience. The fire burned late into the night, a beacon of warmth and light visible from across the neighborhood. People came and went, sharing in the celebration of a victory that belonged to everyone, not just me. As the last guests departed and Caroline and I cleaned up, I looked at the fire burning down to its final coals. 5 years of burning perfectly seasoned wood, 5 years of peace and quiet enjoyment of my home. It had all started with standing up to an orange envelope and refusing to be bullied. I would do it again in a heartbeat. The embers glowed red in the darkness, the last heat of the fire slowly dissipating into the cool night air. I closed the fireplace doors and made sure everything was safe before heading to bed. Tomorrow would bring another day in the mountains, another chance to enjoy the home I had fought to keep. And when winter came again, there would be more fires, more perfectly seasoned wood burning clean and bright, smoke rising invisibly into the Carolina sky. That was all I had ever wanted. The right to use my fireplace in peace, to enjoy my property without harassment, to live my life according to reasonable rules fairly applied. Patricia had tried to take that away, and she had failed. The system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and life had gone on. The mountains stood eternal outside my window, and the firewood stacked neatly in my yard waited for winter's return. Everything was as it should be, hard won but worth the fight. And when the first cold snap of the next winter arrived, I would once again stack logs in my fireplace, light the kindling, and watch the flames catch and spread through the perfectly seasoned wood. The smoke would rise thin and nearly invisible from my chimney, exactly as it had for the past 5 years, because that was what I had learned through all of this. Do things right, document everything, stand your ground and fight when necessary. The perfectly seasoned wood was not just about avoiding complaints. It was about taking pride in doing things correctly, about refusing to give anyone legitimate grounds for criticism, while standing firm against illegitimate harassment. Patricia had taught me that lesson without meaning to, and for that, in a strange way, I was almost grateful. Almost. But mostly I was just grateful for my home, my fireplace, my perfectly burning fires, and the peace that I had fought to protect and won.